and it's the risk of using ignorance as a tool to burn it all down.
Folks, we might have just gotten as close to nuclear fallout as we've been since the 1950s.
Launch the missile now!
Trump and his bumbling gang of wet bandits managed to do the most idiotic thing ever and fire 300 people who are in charge of our nuclear stockpile. Then when they realize their mistake, they try to hire them all back. I know it's been a crazy few weeks, but you guys are not going to believe this new level of incompetence. Elon Musk and the Republicans are scrambling to justify this, which honestly has no justification. I've got all of that here for you in a second, but if you're enjoying the video, make sure to like the video and double check that you're subscribed. Before we dive into them firing some of the most critically important employees in our government, I want to remind you guys what Donald Trump said about his plans for the future of our nuclear stockpile.
We're talking about denuking, denuclearizing, and President Putin and I agreed that we were going to do it in a very big way. There's no reason for us to be building brand new nuclear weapons. We already have so many. You could destroy the world 50 times over, 100 times over. Hopefully there'll never be a time when we need those weapons. If there's ever a time when we need nuclear weapons, like the kind of weapons that we're building and that Russia has and that China has to a lesser extent but will have, that's going to be a very sad day. That's going to be probably oblivion.
Now, I agree that humanity's obsession with nuclear weapons can only lead to oblivion. But what's interesting about that clip is that he suggests that he's already spoken to Vladimir Putin about denuclearizing the United States, which means that at some point he must have given DOGE and Elon Musk permission to fire people at the National Nuclear Security Administration, which is a very important administration for our national security. It's one thing to stop the commissioning of new nuclear weapons. It's another thing to fire everybody who administers the maintenance on the nuclear weapons we already have. I'll play a clip from CNN and then we'll dive into the details.
These are incredibly specific technical jobs. They get terminated in this effort to shrink the government, and then they get brought back when somebody goes, whoa, 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 wait a minute, all cuts aren't the same, this is a problem. What's your reaction when when you hear how all this went down?
Well, I guess my first reaction is I hope they actually do go back. I think they're not under any obligation to. And my second is that it speaks to this sort of ethos that we've seen to all of this cutting, which is that it is cutting for cutting's sake. It is, we're going to reduce the number of employees we have, we're going to reduce the number of programs, we're going to reduce the amount of humanitarian aid, scientific research, you name it, just to hit a number. And in the process of hitting that number, if we lose really critical things, really important missions, really important research, if we lose the people who oversee the nuclear stockpile, so be it. I'm glad that they are trying to reverse this. I hope they're able to. But I think that this is what is happening in every agency across the government. It's just a very highly visible, critical example of it.
That analysis is exactly correct because it's what they claim to be doing. This strategy of cutting everything and then seeing what breaks and then only reinstating those things is often used in the private sector during mergers and acquisitions. The only problem is the government is not a business. The best analogy I can think of is like trying to lose 20 pounds, so you take a knife and you just start cutting off random body parts. If you happen to get fat, great. If you don't, try to put it back on. It doesn't work like that. These employees might not come back, or the work that they were doing might be so critically halted that they have to restart critical work, and we've just wasted millions of dollars. I'll get to an example of that later. But let's dive in closer and see exactly what happened with the NNSA. So on Thursday night, the Trump administration fired more than 300 staffers at the National Nuclear Security Administration, the agency tasked with managing the nation's nuclear stockpile, as part of broader Energy Department layoffs. It's funny that they're trying to unleash American energy by firing everybody at the Energy Department. Sources told CNN that the officials did not seem to know that this agency oversees America's nuclear weapons. Is it strategy or idiocy? At some point, you can't tell the difference. And what's crazy to me is that they tried to cover this up and pretend like it wasn't happening. An Energy Department spokesperson disputed the number of personnel affected, telling CNN that less than 50 people were dismissed from the NNSA, and that the dismissed staffers held primarily administrative and clerical roles. They also tried to say that these were just probationary employees, so employees that were hired in the last year or two. But as it turns out, that also was a lie. A source for CNN said that Congress is freaking out because it appears that the Department of Energy didn't realize that NNSA oversees the nuclear stockpile. The nuclear deterrent is the backbone of American security and stability. period. For there to be any, even very small holes poked even in the maintenance of that deterrent should be extremely frightening to people. And it is frightening to people. To me, at least, this is undeniably a massive mistake, something that they're trying to make up for by hiring these people back. Even the Republicans are finding it impossible to justify this action.
Is this just a big freaking honking mistake that is affecting potentially the nuclear stockpile and the lives of those who have been working there as experts?
I swear. Y'all just really go have these people, these conservatives screaming at me because they're going to say, that's a Republican who disagrees with something that the Trump administration did. Now, when it comes to, my larger problem is the attacks on the federal government worker, as if, for one, they don't pay taxes, and that they're not voters. Like there's this characterization of federal government workers as lazy. So all of this is kind of built into that. And so this very indiscriminate number, these people exist at these agencies for a reason. What I would like for the Trump administration to do, even in explaining, this whole transparency argument, is to do an assessment of what it is that you need. I am very skeptical that they've been able to do an assessment to see what they need at these agencies before just, as we get 300 here, there's another 400 here, because there is an impact to that. And so what I want to hear from the Trump administration is we've covered all our bases, and it seems here, at least with this particular story, that they didn't. Oh, yeah, just make this so
Well, as the other Republican, I'll do you a solid and stand with you on this one, okay?
There we go.
But it is the risk of the burn it all down approach, and it's the risk of using ignorance as a tool to burn it all down. There's certainly pressure from those who voted for this, who want things to happen fast. And so DOGE, the Trump administration, is moving quickly, but it comes at the expense of making mistakes. I will say this, though. We also saw that this is kind of like, zero-based budgeting in a way, right? Where you have to justify some of these agencies and their responsibilities. Members of Congress, nothing is a sacred cow. Members of Congress made calls, they complained, they made the case, voila, it was fixed, and they reversed it. Maybe we'll see that happen with some other agencies. Maybe we won't.
Cut everything you can, see what breaks, and try to reinstate whatever breaks. But there clearly are some parts of the government that are more important than others. And it doesn't take a genius to realize that you shouldn't fire employees who work at the nuclear stockpile. Elon Musk is trying to push this under the radar. For his part, all he posted was a defense from Scott Jennings. I'll play you that little bit and then show you exactly how he's flat out wrong.
I will tell you, just as a broader political matter, I do think the American people are giving this administration pretty wide latitude to shrink the size of the federal government, and doing so with probationary employees, meaning they haven't been there that long at all, strikes me as one good way to go about it, even if you occasionally trip into some mistake, like perhaps, I'm not saying they did, but perhaps they did on this particular agency.
There's plenty of places to trim the fat in government, and I would certainly start with, maybe the $8 billion that Elon Musk gets from contracts with the federal government?
Well, number one, if I could just go back to something Naira said, before you start cutting all of Elon Musk's ties to the federal government, understand that we've asked him to rescue our 2 astronauts in outer space. So maybe don't take a meat axe to Elon's engagement with the feds until we get our astronauts home, number one. Number two, the reason that they're moving fast is because momentum begets momentum. Trump created tremendous political momentum for this kind of change by winning the national popular vote and a real mandate in the Electoral College. He extended the momentum by having a really good transition. And of course, his first 3+ weeks in office, he's continued that. And so momentum begets momentum. And the polling is pretty clear. The American people like what he's doing. There was some focus group reports in Axios this morning. Swing state voters in Arizona were saying, yeah, we like the idea of cutting the federal government. We like the idea of what Trump is doing, and we're willing to give him some space.
Couple things there. Trump won by 1.5%. Not exactly a landslide, so I don't know where they get this idea of a mandate, that the entire United States wants Donald Trump to completely destroy the government. 2, we did not ask Elon Musk to save our astronauts in space. They're not stuck in space. The only reason why SpaceX is going to send the shuttle to get them back to Earth is because the Republicans have been cutting NASA, including the space shuttle program, for like decades. But on top of that, they're not even stranded.
Do you feel you've been abandoned?
We don't feel abandoned. We don't feel stuck. We don't feel stranded. I understand why others may think that. We come prepared. We come committed. If you'll help us change the rhetoric, help us change the narrative, let's change it to prepared and committed.
So there's another lie right there. And lastly, he says that there's some Axios poll that shows that the American people are happy with DOGE and happy with Elon Musk, just slicing and dicing. And I thought that was a little strange because the last poll that I saw had the favorability for DOGE like underneath the ground. So I did a little research and I found what he's referencing. This is an Axios focus group of 11 voters who switched from Biden to Trump. 11 voters. 8 of which are dumb enough to say that they're happy with what DOGE is doing. That is not representative of the country's opinions at all. It's insane that the Republicans are trying to run with this rhetoric that everyone's actually happy with what they're doing. No, they're not, because this slash and dash method is going to have rippling effects across the entire nation. Here's a list of just a few of the long-running studies that the Department of Education was doing that DOGE completely slashed. These are studies that tracked how good kids were in math and science, that kept track of school-level data and crime and safety, that did studies on how to improve education in kindergarten. These are long-running studies, some of them since the 80s, through Republican and Democratic administrations. And now that they've paused or maybe gotten rid of these studies, it's not going to be as simple as just turning it back on. The data might get lost or misplaced, or they might not be able to hire back the same researchers, and so now we've got to kind of start all over. The damage that they're doing now will be felt for years to come. And instead of admitting their mistakes, they're pretending like they've gotten a mandate from the American people to just do whatever they want, as if 75 million people didn't vote against them. While I was recording this video, Donald Trump tweeted this: "He who saves his country does not violate any law." If that doesn't send shivers down your fucking spine, I don't know what will. We've got a mad king with a slimy little worm whispering in his ear. I just hope that the American people wake up before they finish the job of destroying the United States as we know it. I'm Tony Hinderman with Really American, and I'll catch you next time.